Britain has a coastline of more than 11,000 miles and a public footpath network of around 140,000. There are bridleways across the Chalk Downs, drovers' tracks across the Cairn Gorms, ancient byways across Dartmoor. The right to roam is one of the things this country prides itself on. At least that is what everyone thinks. Because scattered across these islands, there are also places fenced off, guarded, patrolled, sealed, and protected by Acts of Parliament most people have never heard of. Places where the perimeter is 20 feet of razor wire and a man with a clipboard who very much does not want to chat. Places where the postcode exists, the maps are honest about the outline, and you will never set foot inside in your life. We found 12 of them. Some are sealed because they are dangerous, some because they are still working, some because the country has decided you do not need to know what goes on in there. If this is your sort of thing, subscribe and stick with us through to number 1. Because at the top of this list is an island off the northwest coast of Scotland, 484 acres of grass and rock, that the British government quarantined in 1942 and did not declare safe again until 1990. 48 years. The reason was anthrax. The reason was us. We start with number 12. Number 12. The Maunsell Sea Forts. You see them on a clear day from the Kent coast, between Whitstable and the mouth of the Medway. Rusting iron towers on stilts, standing in the open sea, miles from anywhere they should be. They were designed by Guy Maunsell, a civil engineer, and they were built to shoot down German aircraft and V-1 flying bombs on the run up to London. The Red Sands Fort and the Shivering Sands Fort are the army versions, each one made of 7 separate platforms joined by walkways. Ruff's Tower and the others are the Navy versions, single concrete pontoons. Combined, the forts brought down 22 German aircraft and around 30 flying bombs during the war. The Royal Navy decommissioned them in 1958, and that should have been the end of the story. But by the late 1960s, the abandoned forts had been claimed by pirate radio stations, by a self-declared micronation called Sealand, and by the Seagulls. The British state, having walked away from them, then decided it would rather other people walked away from them too. Trinity House posted them as a danger to navigation. The Ministry of Defence said landing was prohibited. Most of the connecting walkways have rusted away or collapsed entirely. What is left of them now? 7 cast iron towers off Red Sands, 6 off Shivering Sands, leaning at angles that get more interesting every year. You can take a boat out to them from Whitstable. You can photograph them from the rail. You cannot legally set foot on them, and the few people who have tried in recent years have either fallen through a floor or been escorted back to shore by the Coast Guard. Number 11, Foulness Island, Essex. It looks innocuous on the map, a flat lozenge of mudflats and salt marsh, sitting east of Southend-on-Sea, separated from the mainland by a thin tidal creek. It has a pub, a chapel, 2 small villages called Church End and Court's End, and a population of around 200 people who have lived there for generations. It is also one of the most heavily restricted pieces of land in England. Foulness has been a Ministry of Defence test range since the First World War. Today it is operated by QinetiQ, the privatised defence research firm, and the whole island is fenced, gated and run as a single closed installation. You cannot drive onto Foulness unless you are a resident, a permit holder or an employee. The gate at Landwick, run by men in QinetiQ uniforms, decides who passes. The point of the island is munitions testing, artillery shells, missile components, explosives. You can hear the programme from Shoeburyness on a still day. There is a small heritage centre that opens on the first Sunday of selected months in summer, and the locals will sell you cake. You cannot, on any other day, set foot on the place. There is one route in for outsiders, and it is the route nobody sane uses. The Broomway is a tidal path across the foreshore, 6 miles long, that has killed more than 100 people over the past several centuries. It is sometimes called the Doomway. The tide rises faster than a person can walk, the visibility goes in seconds, and even the path itself is invisible underfoot. You can technically use the Broomway to reach the island. You probably should not. Number 10. Boulby, North Yorkshire. The cliffs at Boulby are the highest on the east coast of England. 203 metres of dark sandstone above the North Sea, somewhere between Whitby and Saltburn. Under them is a working mine. The Boulby mine was sunk by Cleveland Potash in the 1960s. It now belongs to ICL Group, an Israeli chemicals conglomerate, and it goes 1,400 metres into the earth, which makes it the deepest active mine in the United Kingdom. It produces polyhalite, a mineral fertiliser, and it pulls around 1 million tonnes of it out of the ground a year. That alone would keep the public out. Active mine shafts do not allow visitors. But under Boulby, there is also something else, a second site 1 kilometre underground called the Boulby Underground Laboratory. It is one of the deepest physics laboratories in the world, and it exists because that much rock above your head shields out cosmic rays the way nothing on the surface can. Scientists from Imperial College, Sheffield and Edinburgh use it to look for dark matter. The Drift experiment, the Zeppelin experiment, and the planning work for the next generation of detectors all happen down there in the dark, in the quiet, under a fertilizer mine. You will not see any of it. Visitors are restricted to occasional academic and press groups, accompanied at every step by mine safety officers in flame-retardant overalls and full breathing apparatus. The civilian standing on the cliffs at Boulby is looking down at a working industrial site and an underground physics observatory, and is not invited to either. Number 9. Orford Ness, Suffolk. A long pebble shingle spit, 8 miles long, separating the River Alder from the North Sea. From the village of Orford, you can see a row of concrete buildings on the far side of the water. Squat, windowless, with strangely heavy roofs. They are called the pagodas. They were built to explode. The Atomic Weapons Research Establishment took Orford Ness in 1956 and held it until 1971. During that period, it was used to environmental test the components of British nuclear weapons. The pagodas, with their thick reinforced concrete walls and pillars holding up a heavy floating roof, were the buildings where engineers found out whether a warhead would survive being shaken, dropped, frozen, baked and vibrated. The roof design was deliberate. If a component went off, the blast was meant to be vented upwards rather than out. The site also hosted the Cobra Mist radar installation, an Anglo-American over-the-horizon radar project that was operational from 1971 to 1973. It cost around £150 million and was abandoned without ever working properly. The MOD will not say why, even now. The National Trust took over much of the spit in 1993. They have opened a footpath and a ferry across from Orford Quay, and on certain days you can walk a marked route around some of the outer buildings. You cannot enter the pagodas. You cannot walk anywhere off the marked path. Large parts of the Ness are still contaminated with unexploded ordnance from the testing era, and the warning signs are entirely sincere. Number 8. The Royal Air Force Station at Menwith Hill, North Yorkshire. You drive west out of Harrogate on the A59, and a few miles past the village of Kettlesing, the fields suddenly contain something that should not be there. 33 white domes are scattered across the hillside, each one between 30 and 100 feet across. From the road, they look like a herd of golf balls escaped from a science fiction film. They are antennae, Menwith Hill has been operated by the United States National Security Agency since 1960. It is officially an RAF station, and the British Ministry of Defence is the landlord, but the personnel inside are mostly American, the budget is mostly American, and the work is American intelligence collection. The domes are radomes, weatherproof shells that hide satellite tracking dishes and signals intercept equipment. Menwith was the largest electronic monitoring station in the world at the height of the Cold War surveillance program, and it remains one of the most important. Around it runs a perimeter of high-security fencing, motion sensors, lighting and patrols. There is a public footpath that loops along the southern edge of the base, and you may walk it. You may not stop. You may not photograph anything beyond the fence. A small protest camp called the Menwith Hill Accountability Camp has stood near the gate in one form or another since the 1990s. Number 7. Imber, Wiltshire. If you drive southeast out of Devizes towards Warminster, you cross the Salisbury Plain training area. At the village of Gore Cross, on the open chalk down, there is a tarmac road that runs east, marked clearly on the Ordnance Survey, and a heavy red and white barrier across the start of it. The barrier is open about 4 days a year. The road, when it is open, runs 5 miles into the middle of the plain, and at the end of it is a village called Imber. Imber has a 13th century parish church dedicated to St Giles. It has the foundations of a Norman manor house, a pub called the Bell Inn, and the remains of a school, a Baptist chapel, and 17 houses. In 1943, it had 150 residents. On the 1st of November of that year, the residents were called to a meeting at the schoolhouse. They were told by Major General Charles West that they had 47 days to pack up and leave. The plane was needed for American troops training for the Normandy landings. They would be allowed to return after the war. After the war, the residents were told they would not be allowed to return. A public inquiry in 1961 upheld that decision. Most of them died waiting. The MOD still owns Imber, still uses it for urban warfare training, and still keeps the road shut for around 361 days of the year. If you are enjoying these, hit subscribe, because we make these for every country in Europe. We will get to the worst of the 12 in a moment. First, number 6. While Imber's MOD signage promises death and dismemberment to the trespasser, the next site on this list has signage that just says, very quietly, biohazard. Number 6. The Pirbright Institute, Surrey. A few miles south of Woking, in the Surrey woodlands, there is a fenced compound of pale grey buildings that houses one of the most dangerous viral research programs in Europe. The Pirbright Institute, formerly the Institute for Animal Health, is the United Kingdom reference laboratory for foot and mouth disease, blue tongue, African swine fever, and several other infectious agents that the National Reference Laboratory at Weybridge does not handle. The institute runs Category 4 containment. The buildings are negatively pressurised, the air filtered through 3 stages. The staff work in pressure-suited cabinets with double-door autoclave entry. Around 800 people work on site, and the security culture is closer to a defence facility than a university campus. In 2007, that culture failed. A breach in the institute's effluent drainage system released foot and mouth virus into local soil. A nearby cattle farm picked it up. The outbreak that followed cost the British agricultural sector more than £200 million and required 2,000 animals to be slaughtered. A health and safety executive inquiry was published. The drain has been replaced. The site is still where they keep the virus. You can drive past Pirbright on the way to the M3. You can see the perimeter fence from the road. You will not be allowed any closer than that without being a researcher, a regulator, or in very poor health. Number 5. The Salisbury Plain Training Area. The road into Imber that we have just looked at runs 5 miles east from Gore Cross into the middle of the plain. Salisbury Plain is the largest military training area in the United Kingdom, and Imber is one village inside it. The Ministry of Defence owns 93,000 acres of chalk downland in Wiltshire, around 150 square miles, which is roughly the size of the Isle of Wight. The plain has been in continuous military use since 1897. Tanks have run across it for over a century. The Royal School of Artillery sits at Lark Hill. The Combined Arms Tactical Trainer sits at Warminster. The West Down Impact Area, where the live ammunition lands, sits to the north. On the plain there are danger areas, restricted areas, manoeuvre areas, and a fully built mock town called Cope Hill Down, designed in the 1980s as a representation of an Eastern European urban environment for street fighting practice. There are flags. Red flags, which mean firing is in progress, are raised across the plain on around 300 days of the year. When the flags are up, the byways across the plain are legally closed, and crossing them is a criminal offence. What you can do on Salisbury Plain when the flags are down is significant. Walkers, riders and cyclists may cross most of the western half. What you cannot do is set foot on the plain when the flags are up, enter any of the restricted impact areas at any time, or wander off the marked tracks anywhere east of Imber. The unexploded ordnance figure is in the hundreds of thousands. Number 4. Faslane and Coulport, Argyll and Bute. 8 miles north of Helensburgh, on the eastern shore of the Gar Loch, there is a Royal Navy base. It is called Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde, but everyone calls it Faslane. It is the operational home of the United Kingdom's continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent. Faslane is the dock. 8 miles further north, on the western shore of Loch Long, is the storage facility. It is called the Royal Naval Armaments Depot Coulport, and it holds the warheads. Together, the two sites contain every active nuclear weapon the United Kingdom owns. The Vanguard-class submarines that carry the Trident missiles berth at Faslane. The warheads themselves, around 225 of them, at last published estimate, sit in twin-fenced bunkers at Coulport. The perimeter of the base is 16 miles long. The MOD police carry firearms. There is a peace camp at the South Gate that has been there continuously since June 1982, the longest-running anti-nuclear protest in British history. The campers do not get inside. Nobody who has not been formally cleared by the MOD has been inside since the base became operational, and the boundary has been pushed closer to military grade as the years have gone on. Submariners describe Faslane as one of the most secure facilities in Europe. The protesters describe it as the most dangerous patch of ground in Scotland. They are both correct. But neither of them is the most dangerous patch of ground on this list. That is somewhere else. We will get to it. Number 3. Sellafield, Cumbria. On the Cumbrian coast, between the small town of Seascale and the village of Beckermet, there is a fenced site of more than 7 square kilometres. Lit at night, monitored by camera, patrolled by an armed civil constabulary that exists for no other reason than this place. It is the largest nuclear facility in Western Europe. It used to be called Windscale. Before that, it used to be called Sellafield. It is called Sellafield again now. The original site was built in 1947 on the bones of the wartime Drigg Ordnance Factory to produce plutonium for British atomic weapons. The first reactor went critical in 1950. The Calder Hall power station on the same site, opened by the Queen on the 17th of October 1956, was the first commercial nuclear power station in the world. But on the 10th of October 1957, the reactor known as Windscale Pile 1 caught fire, and for 3 days, the worst pre-Chernobyl nuclear accident in Western Europe burned through the core. It released radioactive iodine across northern England and Ireland. Milk from Cumbrian farms was destroyed for months afterwards. Sellafield has been reprocessing spent nuclear fuel ever since. The site contains around 80,000 tonnes of high-level radioactive waste, sealed in storage ponds and silos that are still being decommissioned. The B30 pond is the most contaminated outdoor pond in Europe. The full decommissioning timetable now runs to the year 2120. You cannot visit Sellafield. The visitor centre was closed in 2012. The site is operated by Sellafield Limited, owned by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, and the boundary is patrolled 24 hours a day. The 11,000 people who work inside it are most of the working population of the surrounding villages. The waste they look after will outlast every name this place has had. Number 2. Porton Down, Wiltshire. 5 miles north of Salisbury, on the southern edge of the plain we have already discussed, there is a green-roofed cluster of laboratories and bunkers behind a perimeter of double fence and razor wire. The signs say Defence Science and Technology Laboratory. The signs do not say that the place was founded in 1916 as the British Army's Chemical Warfare Experimental Station, that it has been one of the principal centres of British biological and chemical weapons research for more than 100 years, or that the man at the gate quite genuinely does not want to chat. Between 1939 and 1989, around 20,000 British servicemen took part in chemical exposure trials at Porton Down. Most of them were told they were testing a treatment for the common cold. They were not. They were being exposed to mustard gas, sarin, taboon, and a dozen other nerve agents in measured doses, while doctors recorded the result on paper. On the 6th of May 1953, a 20-year-old Royal Air Force airman called Ronald Maddison reported for one of these trials. 200 milligrams of sarin were placed onto his forearm under a patch of cloth. Within 40 minutes, he was unconscious. Within an hour, he was dead. The Ministry of Defence recorded the cause of death as misadventure. In 2004, after a 50-year campaign by his family, a coroner's inquest ruled that Ronald Maddison had been unlawfully killed. Porton Down is the place that identified the Novichok used in Salisbury in 2018. It is the place where every nerve agent that turns up in a British investigation is analysed. The perimeter is exactly what the hook described. The razor wire is real. The man with the clipboard is real. He has a list, and you are not on it. Number 1. Gruinard Island. Off the northwest coast of Scotland, at the head of Gruinard Bay between Gairloch and Ullapool, there is a small, uninhabited island. It is shaped like a flattened comma, 484 acres, 3/4 of a mile from the mainland at low tide. From the road, it looks like any of the hundreds of small Scottish islands that line that stretch of coast. Heather, grass, bare rock, a few rusted fence lines. In the summer of 1942, the British government chose Gruinard for a series of biological weapons trials. The Ministry of Supply, working with Porton Down, was developing an anthrax bomb. The plan, in case the Germans used biological weapons first, was called Operation Vegetarian. The intention was to drop anthrax-laced cattle cakes across the agricultural regions of Germany, infect the livestock, and starve the cities. To find out whether the agent worked, they needed somewhere to test it. In July 1942, the Davies family, who owned Gruinard, sold it to the government for £500. They were told it would be returned to them when the war ended. The trials began the same month. 80 sheep were tethered in rows on the lower slope of the island, while a small explosive charge containing the Volum strain of anthrax was detonated upwind. Within 3 days, every sheep on the island was dead. The carcasses were burned. The films of the trial are still in the National Archives. The next year, the second test was bigger. Then the scientists went home. What they had not understood, or had understood and chosen to ignore, was that anthrax spores survive in soil for decades. When the war ended, the island was not returned to the Davies family. It was sealed with warning signs. It was patrolled. The Royal Engineers ran sheep tests every few years, and every few years the sheep died within 48 hours. It stayed sealed for 48 years. In 1981, a group of activists calling themselves Operation Dark Harvest landed on the island, collected 250 pounds of contaminated soil, and deposited it at the gates of Porton Down and at the Conservative Party conference in Blackpool. They demanded the island be cleaned. The government, which had insisted for decades that the contamination was contained, suddenly discovered that it could be cleaned. Between 1986 and 1990, 280 tons of formaldehyde were sprayed across the worst affected slopes, diluted in seawater, and the contaminated topsoil was burned in place. In April 1990, a flock of sheep was released onto the island. They lived. On the 24th of April that year, the Minister for the Armed Forces removed the warning signs and declared the island safe. The Davies family bought it back the following year for £500. The exact price the government had paid them for it in 1942. The island is technically open today. You can land on it from a boat. There are no facilities, no signs, and no people, and there is, officially, no anthrax. A small white obelisk on the eastern slope notes the dates. What you are looking at when you stand on Gruinard is a place the British state quarantined for almost half a century because of 3 weeks of work it did there in 1942. There are sheep grazing on it now. There were sheep grazing on it then. Britain has a coastline of more than 11,000 miles and a public footpath network of around 140,000. We started this list with that detail. We end with it, except now the meaning has shifted. What we did not say at the start is that the footpath network in question stops sharply at every site we have looked at today. The right to roam is a real and beautiful thing. It is also a thing that does not apply at Faslane, or at Sellafield, or at Porton Down, or on the eastern slope of Gruinard Island. There are reasons in every case, and the reasons are not always wrong. There are also places where the reasons have outlived the original purpose by decades. Imber has not been needed for urban combat training for 50 years. The Maunsell forts were last fired from in 1945. The country is not as open as it tells itself. It is also not as secretive as it could be. We will keep walking the perimeter fences and reading the warning signs. Subscribe, and we will find the next places together. Thank you.